It's not sexual harassment, Barbara. Well, of course it isn't. I should know. What? Well, it's because you're hideous, Barbara. Good Lord. Well, go on Twitter, whatever that is. What do you mean, me too? All right, that's enough. Stop it now. Ridiculous. Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay, better unmute this Zoom microphone. Evidently you have to press the button twice. Okay. Bear with me. Let's move this somewhere. There we go. Okay. Where were we? Okay, very good. If you're still here, congratulations for sitting through it for so long. Before I left to go to the tool shed, brackets, obtain more scotch, we had learnt from Mr. Riley's paper that Aristophanes and Jesus were somehow related in the fact that you didn't know if either one was real. So let's carry on. We're just beginning page 10, you'll be pleased to know. Excuse me a moment. More scotch. Okay, carrying on. It is possible that Aristophanes did not even exist, as I said previously, and he is just a figure that history teaches us gave us the distance to the sun in the same way that history teaches us that Christopher Columbus discovered America or that Jesus himself existed. Question mark? What? Ugh. The fundamental basis of the scientific data on which the distance to the sun is based on two assumptions. Let me read that again, because that's all one sentence. The fundamental basis of the scientific data on which the distance to the sun is based on two assumptions. That Venus is the same size as Earth, and that Earth is spherical and measuring 24,900 miles in circumference. There is no current science that proves this, and the foundations for the Copernican model are disputed currently ipso facto, yet the national curriculum teaches this as fact, without any proof that it is actually true. There only exists the assumptions that misrepresent scientific data. I fear this paper may be misrepresenting historical data and scientific data, but that's a moot point. It is not taught that Aristophanes' mathematics works two ways. It is taught that it is only possible one way. This is untrue. He's going to talk about Carl Sagan now. For some reason in this paper he's included a passport-sized photo of Carl Sagan looking sort of quizzical, in many ways mirroring my own expression. More scotch. Oh, that's a good scotch. Carl Sagan is the equivalent of either Neil deGrasse Tyson or Brian Cox of today. He is deceased now, but in his working life he taught the children of the 1970s and 1980s what Brian Cox and Neil deGrasse Tyson currently teach the children of today. His teachings have not changed. This can be seen in two ways. Either that the teachings generally were accurate and reliable, or that they were failing to realize that the Aristophanes maths had two interpretations and actually indoctrination. Aristophanes maths had two interpretations and actually indoctrination. No, it does say that. It actually says that. Oh, this is how you know it's good scotch. Because it ruins the back of your throat. I could tell stories about scotch. But this isn't the time or place. Carl Sagan cited the Aristophanes observation in a video that is now archived on YouTube, in which he said, quotation marks, The only answer is that the surface of the Earth is curved. End quotation. Oh, and he's provided a citation to a YouTube video rather than any sort of scientific paper. This entire thing depresses me. I just needed to share that information while I deal with the scotch sweats. We do know that Carl Sagan existed, and we do know that he did promote the mathematics of we do know that Carl Sagan existed, and we do know that he did promote the mathematics that Aristophanes also used, because we can actually see him doing it with the advent of archive footage, so we know the children of the 1970s and 1980s were taught this mathematical model. Oh, would a comma kill you? The national curriculum was introduced in 1988, and that same distant sun appears in it at 93 million miles, so it is at least consistent and reliable to assert that since its inception, that value for the sun is consistently taught and also verifiable. The question is it, quotation marks, misleading use of scientific data, end quotation marks, following the decision in Dimmock? The answer is that it has to be misleading because of the fact the maths does work out both ways, with a distant sun on a curve but also a close sun on a plane. I believe it was mostly rain in planes. Ha! 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 The maths does work out. Was this opposing view ever discussed or disclosed? No! But did it have to be? Well, quotation marks, one-sided, close quotation marks, is the criteria following Dimmock, so it is clear that one-sided was how it was taught, but now it is contentious. The retrospective nature of the Dimmock decision means we can question whether it was right or not. This part concerned the misrepresentation of scientific data, and we clearly see this present with the mathematics that is taught because of the fact that the maths works both ways. The bloody hell is he talking about, working both ways? This element is clearly satisfied at this point. Okay, so he's happy that word salad previously demonstrates that there was some sort of misrepresentation of maths. He hasn't quoted any sort of equation or anything that he says is being misused. Yeah, so more scotch. So, with regards to the first point of the Dimmock decision, it is clear that the teaching of the Copernican model would most definitely be considered satisfied. The remaining three elements will now be considered. Okay, so next element. The deployment of material in such a way as to prevent pupils meaningfully testing the veracity of the material and forming an independent understanding of how reliable it was. Forgive me, I'm having chest pains. Could be cured with scotch. The aforementioned strikes at the heart of the teachings of the national curriculum because the material is deployed so that nobody is able to test astronomical claims when it comes to reliability. NASA basically have so much financial support and so many resources to make anything they want. If they claim something based on the application of the biggest telescopes, nobody is able to verify anything to do with this, even though it is state-owned, brackets, University of Manchester, close brackets now. Jodrell Bank failed to help the writer of this article verify the ping data, probably because they thought he was insane. The writer attempted to get an open dialogue to verify the ping data. However, when it was revealed what was trying to be verified, literally, Jodrell Bank ceased communicating, and despite chasing the lead, the writer failed to obtain any evidence to verify the claim. How difficult can it be to see the evidence of the actual ping? It is their pinnacle moment, and they are cited as being the proof, but it seems that verifying this information would actually require an application from civil procedure rules to actually get this information. What? How can I be confused so often by the English language? Lack of proper application of English language is the only scotch. Oh my. I've got the scotch sweats. It appears everybody is too busy to help, or perhaps they just don't want to, or maybe they don't have it to show. Who knows? But with regards to verifying the claim of the ping data from Jodrell Bank, you will not be able to. I'm sure there are some scientific papers that are regularly cited by other scientists which could be easily obtained using the resources of this fine university. But I fear young Mr. Riley would be unable to locate such resources without special signposting. Scotch. Oh. Changing the focus a little, how can you verify other issues to do with astronomy? There's no question mark there. For example, how would you verify the evidence for gravity? There is no scientific evidence to prove gravity because it is currently defined by Albert Einstein's, no apostrophe, quotation marks, theory of general relativity, close quotation marks, in 1915 as the effect of the curvature of spacetime, a mathematical construct that has no scientific and/or experimental application. Well, that can't possibly be true because I definitely saw Barbara fall down the stairs only this morning. It was literally formulated in his mind. How can this ever be tested within scientific method? The answer is that it cannot. Before 1915, gravity was thought of... Gravity was thought of, apostrophe, a force, apostrophe. And since 1915, it is not a force. It is the effect, in capitals, of the curvature of spacetime. The Cavendish experiment, performed by Henry Cavendish, was the best experimental science to demonstrate, apostrophe, mass attracting mass, apostrophe. But this was superseded by Einstein's, no apostrophe, theory of relativity. Without going into any detail of the experiment, the Cavendish experiment did not manipulate any independent variable to prove causation, an intrinsic and fundamental point of scientific experiment. The independent variable is the presumed cause, in this case, gravity, and this was not manipulated. Even if the Cavendish experiment was credible science, to set up the Cavendish experiment and execute it does not appear to be possible. Is he sure? I'll have to ask Barbara. I'm positive that the chaps in the physics lab frequently demonstrate these principles, of basic physics, to students and allow them to carry out these sorts of experiments themselves, don't they? That's what the fees go for, isn't it? Cavendish experiments and... scotch. Oh, beautiful scotch. I've lost my place. I can barely see. Let me close an eye. I'll see if I can catch up. It should be a case of getting it to work. Alright, okay. If the Cavendish experiment is actually the proof for gravity, it should be repeatable. Another intrinsic and fundamental point for true science. Gravity is not considered to be the attractive force between masses any longer by science. That's the end of that sentence. It is now said to be, quotation marks, the bending of spacetime, close quotation marks. He keeps switching between quotation marks and apostrophes, and frankly, it's getting confusing. Right, it is now said to be the bending of spacetime as per Albert Einstein. No, comma, but if this is the case, comma, with regards to the verification of the claim of gravity, comma, how could anybody get to bend any spacetime? Question mark. One of the key factors from the Dirac case is, quotation marks, testing the veracity, of the material and forming an independent understanding, quotation marks closed, the data. What? One of the key factors from the Dirac case is testing the veracity of the material and forming an independent understanding the data? I think we need to add just a basic sort of English language module on the beginning of whatever Mickey Mouse law thing this man-child is is engaged in. But then that would cost money, which would mean less scotch. Okay, so we have just finished that terrible sentence. How is the bending of space-time capable of verification? Secondly, he's not going to answer that. Even if gravity was as per Newtonian principles, gravity is said... I'll read this slowly because either I've drunk too much scotch or this makes less sense than anything I've read so far. Follow along if you can. Secondly, even if gravity was as per Newtonian principles, gravity is said to derive from the centre of mass, ... the core of the Earth. Full stop. Secondly, even if gravity was as per Newtonian principles, gravity is said to derive from the centre of mass, ... the core of the Earth. Okay. To verify within the true meaning of science, you would need to manipulate the gravitational force of attraction by getting another planet and varying its proximity to Earth to vary the force of gravity on Earth. This is obviously nonsense. Yes, it is, Anthony Riley. It's absolute nonsense. Okay, this is obviously nonsense, but this is the problem with verification following Dimmock. Almost all the science associated with quotation marks, space, quotation marks, is basically unable to be verified independently so as to form an independent understanding of how reliable the information it is. Of how to form... Has he been drinking scotch as well? As how to form an independent understanding of how reliable the information it is. It is simply the case that most science is effectively a cartel, oh my, and seems to be either not actually exist, and seems to either not actually exist or not be available without a court order. It would be interesting to see what would happen if an application to court was made under the civil procedure rules and see what evidence of the Venus-reflected Bing is actually available. I think a Google search would be the best option for young Master Riley, but as I've said previously, I fear he may have suffered some kind of life-changing head injury. Turning to the third point. Right. Well, the previous evidently summed up a point. I have no idea what the point is. Okay, the third point. The exaltation of protagonists and their motives, coupled with the demonstration of opponents and their motives, and... Okay, he's just cut it off there. Doesn't really say what the third point is. Scotch. Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Brian Cox are most definitely exalted protagonists. The whole of science is generally exalted, but the main protagonists are elevated into superficial stardom. People look up to them with wonder at how fantastic they are. Literally, this is not exaggeration for the sake of demonstration. Are you sure, Mr. Raleigh? Certain people are promoted on television akin to, for example, Sir David Attenborough. Nobody would question that Attenborough is the modern, quotation marks, king of nature, close quotation marks, or that Michael Jackson is the, quotation marks, king of pop, close quotation. Who's Michael Jackson? Barbara. Who's Michael Jackson, Barbara? Oh, he's a dead pedophile. Jeez. Well, if that's what you need to do to get to the king of pop, I think we should keep a close eye on who's that? That young Canadian man. I forget his name. Justin Bieber. That's the one. Oh, excuse me. Scotch. Well, that Michael Jackson is the king of pop when it comes to music. Brian Cox et al. Are promoted by television in such a way that one cannot easily avoid being sucked in by their warm, welcoming tone to their voice. Perhaps it is natural of the man, or perhaps it's taught with some form of elocution, ? Either way, there is no doubt that all of these people that push the Copernican model are exalted protagonists. Are the motives of their opponents demonized, though? That is the second part. Well, the geocentric folk, open brackets, that follow Aristotle, close brackets, are ridiculed rather than demonized, and creationists, open brackets, that follow biblical texts, perhaps, close brackets, are also ridiculed. The electric universe followers are outright the electric universe followers are outright dismissed and not really treated as even opposition. But the point is that none of the opposing views are treated fairly, regardless of their view. Alright. Well, that's like saying you could pass a driving test if you didn't believe in cars. Ridiculous. Is this enough to be demonized, in quotation marks? Let us say that ridicule is not demonization for the application of Dimmock. That does not stop it being challenged in court. The counter-argument would be, quotation marks, ridicule is not demonization, close quotation marks. In this context, but if you have ever engaged in the debate of, quotation marks, creation versus evolution, close quotation marks, and argue against evolution on the basis that there is no evidence to prove that a donkey fish evolved into bison at some point, you will quickly be demonized for challenging evolution on the grounds of evidence. Well, obviously, because that's not what evolution is. You know, I once went to a seminar held by one of our religious education professors, who thankfully no longer works here. He was talking about dinosaurs after the Great Flood. Now, I know what you're thinking, but stick with me. This is 100% true. He said, after the Great Flood, when all the water had fallen from the firmament and now gone into the earth, the air pressure was reduced because of the lack of water above the atmosphere. So, he then suggested that these enormous creatures, referred to as dinosaurs, had very big lungs, but very small nostrils, and this was because they were used to breathing in air at high pressure. Once the air pressure had dropped, they had to breathe much, much faster. And the friction caused by their fast breathing through those tiny nostrils caused their nostrils to heat up and catch on fire. Which is why the dinosaurs died out. Now, you think you understand just how crazy people can be, but some people are certifiably insane. Yes, well, there's no such thing as a donkey fish evolving into bison. That's as silly as a crocoduck. Anyway, demonization would come after the initial ridicule. Yes, it would. Ridicule would become demonization, and any evidence of character assassination would support the view that opponents are demonized. Check the comments section of any Kenthoven debate on the issue on YouTube, and you will see evidence of demonization, so it can be argued that demonization of the opposition is further down the line than merely ridiculing the opposition, but any evidence of troll-like tactics would then open the door to demonization element. A comma, again, would be good. The internet is full of demonization of opponents and their views, so it can be argued that demonization is a harsh adjective, and within a school environment, it isn't likely to see such views unless the issue was contentious, and if the issue wasn't even pre-warned initially, there would not be any demonization unless it was unless it was identified as contentious initially. The Copernican solar system The Copernican solar system is not taught with a balanced view in the first place, so it does not follow that demonization can be demonstrated if it is one-sided initially. It requires the opposing views to be posed initially to have any chance of the demonization of opposing views or motives. Oh, God. Scotch. In light of this, the exaltation is sufficient because to even have the demonization of opposing views, there has to be that opposing view initially. In the Copernican teachings of the national curriculum, this does not exist. Let us now consider the final factor from the Dimmock case. We are only on page 13. Okay, the final factor. The derivation of a moral expedient from assumed consequences requiring the viewer to adopt a particular view and course of action in order to do right as opposed to wrong. Put simply, you will not pass your exams if you don't cite, no apostrophe and don't, it should be do not, Anthony. This is a scholarly document. That sort of contraction is not really welcome in a legal thesis. I can't take this seriously anymore. Put simply, you will not pass your exams if you don't cite that the sun is 93 million miles, and then cite the rest of the Copernican model when asked. If you don't cite that the sun is 93 million miles, and then cite the rest, well, I imagine he means 93 million miles away. This fourth factor is satisfied without any further discussion. Thank God for that. Back to the outcome of the Dimmock case. We have discussed in the first point, brackets of 3, close brackets, that Dimmock made. A full stop. Oh, he actually thought that was a sentence, okay? Scotch. Ugh. This first point gave the factors that would allow an issue to be deemed as, quotation marks, partisan politics, close quotation marks, but there were 2 other points from the discussion in Dimmock. Full stop. We have only looked at the first one. Oh. The second point of law Dimmock was clear on is the requirement of, quotation marks, promotion, close quotation marks. The material has to be promoted for the offence to be committed. Merely presenting a view is not what is caught. Merely presenting the Copernican/heliocentric model is not promotion of partisan political material. What is forbidden is the, quotation marks, promotion, close quotation marks, of the partisan politics. This is the point that Dimmock lost his point of law on, so attention here is what? This is the point that Dimmock lost his point of law on, so attention here is necessary. Again. The occasional comma, Mr. Riley. The decision of Judge Burton at paragraph 12 says the following, and then he's copy-pasted in a large paragraph from the decision, paragraph 12, I assume. He hasn't labelled it as paragraph 12 properly. But he's highlighted 6 words. So the important bit that he wants us to get from this paragraph of legal text on which he's basing this is 6 words, and those 6 words are, and with proper tuition and debate. Emphasis added in yellow, yeah. The Dimmock case failed because of this point. The judge said merely presenting a view was not going far enough to fall foul of the law. There must be an active promotion. Judge Burton contrasts merely presenting the Al Gore documentary with presenting to the pupils, quotation marks, no doubt with the appropriate setting and proper tuition and debate, close quotation marks. This losing point cost Dimmock because the judge expressly stated that he had no doubt that if there did exist, quotation marks, proper tuition and debate, close quotation marks, and the writer of this document agrees. What? This losing point cost Dimmock because the judge expressly stated and the writer of this document agrees. The global warming debate has long been an issue worthy of discussion, and it is very unlikely that any classroom would actually be able to get through the video of Al Gore without that debate. Are we melting the ice caps, or are they melting by themselves, and what exactly is the effect? Question mark. Oh, God. There's more. However, the losing point in Dimmock can be contrasted in italics for some reason with the point questioning the teaching of the Copernican model. The national curriculum is a structured framework, and certain key principles must be taught. Scotch. Certain key principles must be taught. And then, in italics, for no reason, there are no opposing views taught at all in the national curriculum for any debate to arise in the first place. Exclamation mark. The other point was, quotation marks, with proper tuition, close quotation marks, and debate. Well, to know if the tuition is, quotation marks, proper, close quotation marks, the children have to critically challenge the heliocentric model, but there is no identified opposing view. Brackets, S, views, view or views, he means, to suggest that there is any need to critique the model, which is why one of the factors, open brackets, as discussed at page 5, close brackets, quotation marks, that the deployment of material in such a way as to prevent pupils from meaningfully testing the veracity of the material and forming independent understanding as to how reliable it is, close quotation marks, is fouled. I'm going to take a breath, because that was a long sentence, without any bloody commas. More scotch. If it is not disclosed that there are opposing views and evidences, the children will not be aware that there is something worthy of forming that independent understanding. Some of the issues within tuition are discussed in the second half of this document. Second half? Oh God, we're not even halfway. You know, there have been 4 times in my life that I have seriously considered suicide. And now is one of them. One of the other times was when I won the Victoria Cross for services to law, when I got Judge Judy in a headlock and snatched her wig. But I digress. If the children are not being informed of opposing views initially, by that very fact, it would seem to both contrast with the losing reason from the Dimmock case and subsequently satisfy the term, quotation marks, political indoctrination, close quotation marks, and although it is a point for a judge to decide upon, one really could populate credible scientific evidence to support the assertion that the children are not receiving, quotation marks, proper tuition, close quotation marks, nor having, quotation marks, proper debate, close quotation marks, in the context of the taught model. The third point that resulted from Dimmock was that the Secretary of State had to disclaim the Al Gore film as not being supported by him and that there were opposing views to the contrary. Okay. Applying this to the teachings of Copernican heliocentricity, I do apologize, scotch. It should be the case that the national curriculum teaches the children that the issue of Copernicus is not accepted by everybody, and that there are views to the contrary, and that would then stimulate conversation about what opposing views are. This works hand in hand with the previous point. The previous point seems so long ago that I cannot remember what it was. Section 406 is a prohibition of the promotion of partisan politics. It is posed that the Copernican teachings are precisely what is called by Section 406 because it is promoting partisan politics by omission. So, moving on to Section 407, this is the balancing of the scales in law, let us reconsider the wording of the law again. Well, we're all law professors here, so I'm not going to read out the law again. But it was Section 407. You can find it in the first section of this set of audio. Let us provisionally accept that the Copernican model of national curriculum is still actually partisan politics that are, in law, being promoted. This means heliocentrism must be prohibited by the local authority, board of governors, and the headmaster. However, nobody has forbidden this teaching at the time of writing. There is not even a challenge to Copernican teachings currently in discussion until now. Well, no, of course there isn't. Why would there be? Scotch. Oh. I don't think I'm going to go on for much longer. I'll finish this page and then take another break, because I'm struggling to contain my rage. Section 407 allows for a balanced presentation of opposing views. Not one in particular, but opposing views in general. So for Aristotelian geocentrism, there should be evidence demonstrating this. There is nothing in the national curriculum to show this balance of opposing geocentric views. Let us now consider the electric universe supporters for one moment. Are they given any balanced presentation for their opposing views? Of course they're not. So what about creationists that believe God created the world? Yes, they get a slice of the pie in religious education, but what about in science? Does the creation teachings have any slice in science? The answer is no. Creation is taught in the context of religious education as opposed to science, and in doing so, it separates creation from science to the effect that it is a belief rather than a science. By that segregation, science has its very own section that is partitioned off, and if you give its protagonists a white coat, one can remember the effect of this. What? And if you give its protagonist a white coat, comma, one can remember the effect of the Stanford experiment by Philip Zimbardo that showed there is a psychological effect with a perceived power, and this effect significantly increases conformity to role. Without going into too much detail, the Stanford experiment. Philip Zimbardo himself played the role of a superintendent, and voluntary participants were split into the roles of either a prison guard or an inmate. Zimbardo showed that, open brackets, rightly or wrongly, close brackets, that you will conform to that role. That's three that's in 9 words. If you were a prison guard, you will actually go as far as beating prisoners if you were encouraged to do so, because that is what you were made to believe by the experiment. Conversely, if you were an inmate, you were more likely to accept the beating psychologically by virtue of your inmate status rather than stop the experiment and speak up against the assault in law. The subjects did play out their role, and the experiment was stopped due to how adaptive the subjects became to their respective roles. Is there more? Good. At the end of this page there's a full stop, at long last. Let us affirm the position more by reminding ourselves of the Stanley Milgram obedience experiment, where willing participants were instructed to complete the task of electrocuting people with ever-increasing severity for providing a wrong answer. Even under protest, willing shock givers would still complete the punishment for the failings of a participant by administrating what they thought was a shock, even when the participant stopped screaming and the inference was he was dead. This is odd to me because I don't see the relevance. This may just be to pad the word count. In this context, it is clearly the case that Copernican teachings are taught as, quotation marks, science, close quotation marks, with a perceived authoritarian stance, and because the only opposing view, brackets, creation, close brackets, that is taught is only done so in religious education, and no other opposing views are taught in science as the opposing view. Copernican teachings are taught in isolation as fact, and this is unlawful without the pupils being presented a balanced opposing view, as found in Section 407 of the Education Act, 1996. Yes, that is Section 407 of the Education Act, 1996. So the next question to ask is pertinent. If there has to be the presentation of opposing views to the pupils, ... what are these views that must be considered? Question mark. And let us be fair here, without a capital letter, there will be a reluctance to any headmaster that genuinely believes, more scotch, I think. There will be a reluctance to any headmaster that genuinely believes we live in a Copernican model unless science deems the model invalid. It is suggested that the judiciary is better placed to contrast between the real science over pseudoscience, because a judge is better placed to accept the evidence that can prove things if science is being questioned overwillingly. I'm going to try that sentence again, and I'm going to read it as written. It is suggested that the judiciary is better placed to contrast between the real science over pseudoscience, because a judge is better placed to accept the evidence that can prove things if science is being questioned over willingly accepted pseudoscience in place of cause and effect relations. Okay. At this particular moment, my scotch glass has fallen empty. We have reached page 17. And I have to quickly ask a Barbara question. So, I will return shortly. Better mute this. That's muted, I think, yeah. seem to have dropped my pen. Would you mind just coming in here and picking